The snow had stopped falling an hour ago, leaving the forest road silent except for the wind. Rosalind Graymont lay in a drift beside the path, her cream travelling dress soaked through, her left arm bent at an angle that promised pain if she tried to move it. Blood had dried along her temple where her head struck a rock when Caspian pushed her from the carriage. She remembered his face in those final moments, not angry, not cruel, just practical, like he was discarding something broken. "You know too much, Rosalind," he'd said, his voice steady over the sound of the storm. "I gave you a choice. Keep quiet. Marry me. Play your role. But you had to be righteous. You had to threaten to expose everything." She'd found the ledgers 3 days ago, hidden in his father's study during what was supposed to be a pleasant visit to the Holtworth country estate. Numbers that didn't match, investments that didn't exist. Dozens of families, widows, orphans, elderly lords who'd trusted Lord Holtworth with their money, all of them being systematically robbed. When she'd confronted Caspian, demanding he make it right before she would marry him, he'd smiled. That same charming smile he'd used when he proposed. "You're very noble," he'd said, "and very foolish." The next morning he'd suggested a romantic carriage ride through the forest to clear the air before the wedding. She'd believed him because she'd wanted to believe him. Fool. Now she lay in the snow, watching her breath form small clouds that dissipated into nothing. The cold had stopped hurting 20 minutes ago. She knew what that meant. Her body was giving up. No one would find her. This road was barely used in winter. Caspian had planned it perfectly. When she didn't return, he'd express concern, organize a search party in the wrong direction, and eventually declare it a tragic accident. She insisted on walking ahead when the carriage wheel stuck, he'd say. "I lost sight of her in the storm." Her family would grieve. The wedding would be cancelled. Caspian would wait a respectable period, then marry someone else. Someone who didn't ask questions, and the families he was robbing would never know. Rosalind closed her eyes. She'd tried to do the right thing. It had killed her. The sound of hoofbeats made her eyes snap open, a single rider moving fast through the forest. Probably someone trying to get home before dark. She tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper. Her throat was too cold. The rider drew closer. "Please," she thought, "please see me." The horse slowed, stopped. Rosalind forced her head to turn, pain shooting through her neck. Through blurred vision she saw a man dismount, tall and dark against the white landscape. He moved with swift efficiency, kneeling beside her. "Christ," he muttered. Strong hands touched her face, her neck, checking for injuries. His gloves were leather, expensive. His coat was black wool, tailored. A gentleman, then, or a lord. "Can you hear me?" His voice was deep, controlled. "Can you speak?" "Cold," she managed. "I know, stay still." He removed his coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her with surprising gentleness. She gasped as pain flared through her arm. "Your arm is broken," he said, carrying her toward his horse. "Possibly ribs as well. How long have you been here?" "Don't know." He positioned her carefully on the saddle, then mounted behind her, one arm holding her secure against his chest. "The nearest inn is 15 kilometers. Can you stay conscious that long?" "I'll try. Try harder. I didn't find you just to watch you die." The ride blurred into fragments. The warmth of his body behind her, the steady rhythm of the horse, his voice, occasionally asking questions to keep her awake. "What's your name? Who did this to you?" "Stay with me." She must have lost consciousness despite his efforts, because the next thing she knew, she was being carried into warmth and light. Voices surrounded her, a woman's cry of alarm, the man's steady commands, "Send for a physician, hot water, blankets, now." Rosalind was laid on something soft, a bed. Hands removed her wet clothing, replaced it with dry linen. The physician came, his touch impersonal as he set her arm, bound her ribs, stitched the wound on her temple. Through it all she heard the man's voice in the background, speaking to the innkeeper. She'll need the room for at least a week. Send the bill to Ravenfield Manor and send word to no one without my permission. Is that clear? Ravenfield Manor. Even through the haze of pain and exhaustion, Rosalind recognized the name. Dorian Vale, Duke of Ravenfield. The most powerful man in the Northern Territories, the man Lord Holtworth called the Enemy at every family dinner. She'd been found by Caspian's greatest rival. Rosalind didn't know if that made her lucky or damned. She woke to firelight and silence. The room was small but clean, the bed soft beneath her back. Her left arm was splintered and bound. Her head throbbed, but she was warm and alive. "You're awake." Rosalind turned her head carefully toward the voice. The Duke sat in a chair beside the window, watching her with pale grey eyes that seemed to see too much. In the firelight, his features were sharp. Strong jaw, straight nose, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, despite looking no older than his early 30s. He wore no coat now, just a white shirt and dark waistcoat, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like a man who had better things to do than sit vigil over a stranger. "How long?" she asked, her voice rough. 2 days. The physician says you're fortunate. Another hour in the cold, and we'd be having a different conversation. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. You saved my life. Yes. He stood, walking to the small table beside her bed where a pitcher of water waited. He poured a glass and helped her sit up enough to drink. Now, you're going to tell me why I had to. Rosalind drank slowly, buying time. I don't understand. You were left in the middle of a forest road during a snowstorm. Your injuries suggest you fell from a moving carriage. Someone wanted you dead, or at least gone. He set the glass down, his gaze never leaving her face. Who? She could lie. She should lie. But what was the point? Lord Caspian Holtworth, she said quietly. Something flickered in the Duke's eyes. Recognition. Interest. You're the Holtworth bride, he said. It wasn't a question. Was. I suppose I'm nothing now. Why would your fiancé try to kill you? Rosalind looked at the fire. Because I found proof that his family has been embezzling from their investors for years. Widows' pensions, trust funds, everything. When I told him I couldn't marry him unless he made it right, he decided I was a problem that needed to disappear. And you believed he'd take you for a romantic carriage ride after that conversation? I wanted to believe people could change. She met his eyes. Clearly, I was wrong. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It was a small, cold thing. You threatened to expose the Holtworths. Yes. You have proof? I saw the ledgers. I can identify which investments are fraudulent. I know names, dates, amounts. She paused. But I don't have documentation. Caspian has that. But you remember enough to destroy them. If anyone would believe me. Rosalind laughed bitterly. Who would? I'm a disgraced bride with no family connections and no credibility. Caspian will say I'm lying out of spite. The Duke walked back to his chair, settling into it with the grace of a predator. What if someone with credibility backed your claims? Like who? Like me? Rosalind's heart beat faster. Why would you do that? Because I've been trying to destroy the Holtworths for 20 years. They've blocked every reform I've proposed, undermined every alliance I've built, and personally cost me more than you can imagine. His voice was quiet, controlled, and utterly certain. You have information I need, and you need protection they can't penetrate. What are you suggesting? Dorian Vale leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Marry me instead? The room seemed to tilt. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about strategy. You marry me, you become a duchess, untouchable. Under my protection, Caspian can't reach you. You help me build a case against his family. Testimony, details, everything you remember. We destroy them together. That's insane. That's practical. He stood. You have no family who can shelter you. If you try to go home, Caspian will find a way to finish what he started. If you try to disappear, you'll spend your life looking over your shoulder. But as my wife, you're beyond his reach. Rosalind tried to sit up fully, gasping as pain shot through her ribs. You don't even know me. I know enough. You chose conscience over safety. You threatened a powerful family because it was right. You survived being left to die. He walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. I've spent years playing politics with these people. You took action. I respect that. But you don't love me. No, and you don't love me. This isn't about romance, Miss Graymont. It's about survival and strategy. He glanced back at her. I'll have papers drawn up. You'll have your own rooms in Ravenfield Manor. We'll maintain separate lives. In public, we'll play the role of a respectable marriage. In private, we'll work to dismantle the Holtworths piece by piece. And if I refuse, then I'll pay for your recovery here and leave you to your fate. But know this, Caspian believes you're dead. The moment you surface anywhere, that changes. He'll come for you, and next time I won't be there to find you. The fire crackled in the silence. Rosalind thought of Caspian's face as he pushed her from the carriage. The cold, the certainty that she would die alone. She thought of the families being robbed, the widows losing everything, the children who'd inherit nothing because of Holtworth greed. And she thought of the man standing by the window, offering her a devil's bargain wrapped in protection. If I do this, she said slowly, I want your word that you'll pursue justice for the families they've harmed. Not just revenge, justice. Dorian turned to face her fully. You're negotiating terms while lying in a sickbed with broken bones. Those are my terms. Something that might have been respect crossed his face. Agreed. Justice, not just revenge. Anything else? I want to know what you get out of this beyond political victory. He was quiet for a moment, then, the Holtworths killed someone I cared about 5 years ago. They made it look like an accident. I've never been able to prove it. His voice remained steady, but his eyes were ice. So yes, Miss Graymont, I want revenge, but I'll settle for justice if that's what it takes to destroy them. Rosalind understood revenge. She understood wanting someone to pay for their cruelty. One more condition, she said. If at any point I become a liability to you, if this arrangement puts you in danger, you let me go. No argument. That won't happen. Promise me anyway. Dorian crossed the room, standing beside her bed. He extended his hand. I promise. Do we have an agreement? She looked at his hand. Strong, scarred across the knuckles, belonging to a man who'd just offered to make her a duchess so they could destroy their common enemies. She'd been left in the cold to die. Now she was being offered a chance to fight back. Rosalind took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was firm, warm. Then rest, Miss Graymont. When you're well enough to travel, I'll take you to Ravenfield. We have work to do. He released her hand and moved toward the door. Your Grace, she called after him. He paused, looking back. Why were you on that road? In the middle of a storm? For a moment his expression shifted, something almost vulnerable beneath the controlled surface. I was coming back from my northern estates. That road is the fastest route, even in winter. He opened the door. I don't believe in fate, Miss Graymont, but I'm grateful I chose speed over comfort that day. Then he was gone, leaving Rosalind alone with the fire and the weight of the choice she'd just made. She'd been abandoned in the cold by a man who saw her as a problem. Now she'd bound herself to a man who saw her as a weapon. Rosalind closed her eyes and hoped she'd chosen the lesser danger. 4 days later, Rosalind sat in a carriage emblazoned with the Ravenfield crest, watching the countryside roll past while her ribs ached with every bump in the road. The physician had protested the journey, but the Duke had simply paid him double and ordered the carriage prepared with extra cushions. "The longer you stay at that inn, the more questions people ask," Dorian had said that morning. "Ravenfield is isolated, safer, and we have better physicians." Now she was traveling to a manor she'd never seen, to marry a man she barely knew, to become part of a scheme she didn't fully understand. Dorian rode on horseback alongside the carriage, checking on her periodically. He was a careful guardian, she'd learned. Impersonal, but thorough. He made sure she ate, that her injuries were tended, that she had everything she needed. But he never touched her beyond necessity. Never asked about her life before, never revealed anything of himself. It was like being cared for by a very efficient ghost. As the sun began to set, they crested a hill, and Ravenfield Manor came into view. Rosalind had expected something grand. She hadn't expected a fortress. Grey stone walls rose 4 stories, topped with crenellations like a castle. Narrow windows stared out over manicured grounds that stretched for miles. The main building was flanked by 2 wings, creating a U-shape around a central courtyard. Everything about it spoke of power, age, and absolute control. "It's beautiful," she said when Dorian appeared at the carriage window. "It's defensible," he corrected. "My family built it during the Civil War. We've held it ever since." He opened the carriage door. "Can you walk?" "I can try." He helped her down carefully, his hands steady on her waist. The moment her feet touched the ground, the manor's main doors opened, and staff began streaming out. Rosalind froze. "I thought you said this would be private." "The marriage will be, but the staff needs to meet their new Duchess." He offered his arm. "Remember, you're not a victim here. You're the woman who survived what should have killed her. Stand like it." She took his arm, drawing on every lesson her mother had ever taught her about posture and deportment. Her ribs screamed in protest, but she kept her spine straight. The staff assembled in 2 lines, at least 30 people, from the ancient butler to the youngest scullery maid. At the front stood a woman with steel-grey hair and a spine to match. "Your Grace," the woman said with a precise curtsy. "Welcome home." "Mrs. Langley," Dorian nodded. "This is Miss Rosalind Greymont. She'll be the Duchess of Ravenfield within the week. She's recovering from an accident and requires care. See to it." Mrs. Langley's sharp eyes took in Rosalind's splintered arm, the fading bruises on her temple, the careful way she held herself. Something like approval flickered across her face. "Of course, Your Grace. Welcome to Ravenfield, Miss Greymont. We are honored to serve you." "Thank you, Mrs. Langley," Rosalind said, keeping her voice steady despite the pain. "I look forward to learning from you all." It was a simple response, but Mrs. Langley's expression softened slightly. "Your rooms have been prepared in the East Wing. If you need anything, I am at your disposal." Dorian released Rosalind's arm. "Mrs. Langley will show you to your quarters. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll discuss arrangements." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the manor like he'd already forgotten she existed. Mrs. Langley cleared her throat. "This way, miss." The manor's interior matched its exterior, all stone and dark wood, with tapestries depicting battle scenes and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Mrs. Langley led Rosalind through corridors that seemed to go on forever, up a grand staircase, and finally into the East Wing. "The Duke keeps to the West Wing," Mrs. Langley explained. "You'll find him in the library most evenings, or in his study during the day. He values privacy." "And what does he value in a duchess?" Rosalind asked. Mrs. Langley paused, her hand on a door handle. "Honestly, I don't know. We've never had one before." She opened the door. "These are your rooms. I hope they suit." The suite was larger than Rosalind's entire childhood home. A sitting room with a fireplace, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed, a dressing room with empty wardrobes, and a private bathing room with a copper tub. "It's overwhelming," Rosalind admitted. "You'll adjust. Most do." Mrs. Langley moved to the fireplace, stoking it to life. "The Duke has ordered a seamstress to call tomorrow. You'll need appropriate gowns. He's also arranged for tutors, etiquette, dance, household management. You have 6 weeks before your first public appearance." 6 weeks to become a duchess? 6 weeks to look like one. Being one takes longer. Mrs. Langley straightened. "But if I may speak frankly, miss, please. The Duke doesn't make careless decisions. If he brought you here, he believes you can do this. Don't prove him wrong." After Mrs. Langley left, Rosalind sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of exhaustion. Her arm throbbed. Her ribs ached. Her head pounded. But she was alive. And she'd made a bargain that would either save her or destroy her. Through the window, she could see the forest in the distance, dark trees against a darkening sky. Somewhere out there was the road where she'd nearly died, the spot where Caspian had left her. He thought she was dead. Good. Let him think that while she learned to become something he couldn't touch. A knock at the door startled her. "Come in." A young maid entered carrying a tray. "Mrs. Langley sent dinner, miss. And the Duke asked me to give you this." She handed Rosalind a small leather-bound book. "What is it?" "His instructions, miss. He said you should read it tonight." The maid left. Rosalind opened the book, finding pages filled with precise, angular handwriting. "Miss Graymont, you'll find the next 6 weeks challenging. I'm not a patient teacher and I have high expectations, but I believe you're capable of meeting them. These pages contain everything you need to know about Ravenfield, its history, its politics, and the role you'll play. Study them. Your survival depends on understanding this world. We'll dine together each evening at 8. Be punctual. We'll use that time to discuss your progress and coordinate our strategy against the Holtworths. Remember our agreement. You help me destroy them. I keep you safe. Everything else is negotiable." Vale Rosalind closed the book and looked at the dinner tray. Cold roast chicken, bread, cheese. Simple food, but more than adequate. She ate mechanically, her mind already racing through the implications of what she'd agreed to. She'd been left in the cold to die by a man who'd pretended to love her. Now she'd bound herself to a man who'd never pretended anything. Somehow, that felt like the more honest danger. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of lessons and bruises. The tutors Dorian hired were thorough and merciless. Rosalind learned which fork to use for fish, how to curtsy to varying ranks of nobility, which topics were acceptable in polite conversation, and which would end her career before it began. She learned that Ravenfield Manor had been in the Vale family for 400 years, that Dorian's grandfather had been a war hero, that his father had died when Dorian was 19, leaving him to manage estates, investments, and political alliances most men didn't master until middle age. She learned that Dorian woke at dawn, worked until midnight, and never seemed to sleep, that he hated small talk but excelled at strategic conversation, that he remembered everything anyone ever told him and used that information like currency, and she learned that he was absolutely ruthlessly focused on destroying the Holtworths. "Tell me again about the Ledgers," he said one evening over dinner. They sat at opposite ends of a table built for 20, the distance between them symbolic. Rosalind set down her fork. "Lord Holtworth's study, 3rd shelf behind a copy of Principles of Political Economy, red leather binding, 3 volumes. What was the largest embezzlement you saw?" "Lady Thornbury's late husband's trust, £50,000, supposed to be invested in textile manufacturing. Instead, it was diverted to cover the Holtworth family's personal debts." Dorian made a note in the small book he always carried. "Lady Thornbury has influence with the Queen. If we can prove that theft, it starts to build momentum. How do we prove anything without the ledgers? We find other evidence, bank records, witnesses, patterns of behavior." He looked up. "And we get you in front of people who matter. Once you're established as the Duchess of Ravenfield, your word carries weight. It's harder to dismiss you as a scorned bride. So I'm bait. You're an asset. There's a difference. Is there? Dorian's expression didn't change. Bait is disposable. Assets are protected. Which do you think I'd fight for? It wasn't a declaration of affection, but it was, in its way, a promise. The wedding is scheduled for Friday, he continued. Private ceremony, just us and 2 witnesses. Afterward, you'll legally be untouchable by Caspian. Then we accelerate the plan. What plan exactly? You'll make your first public appearance in 3 weeks. Lady Pemberton's weekend house party. It's the most exclusive social event of the season. Every influential family will be there, he paused, including the Holtworths. Rosalind's stomach turned. You want me to face him? I want you to stand beside me as my Duchess while he watches everything he threw away become something he can never touch. And I want you to do it with your head high. What if he tries something? He won't. Not with me there. Not with witnesses. Dorian's voice was cold and certain. But he will know you survived, and that knowledge will eat him alive. Udil, that night, Rosalind stood at her window, watching snow fall over the gardens. In 2 days, she'd marry a man who'd rescued her from death. In 3 weeks, she'd face the man who'd tried to kill her. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something sharper, something that tasted like rage and justice mixed together. Caspian had left her in the cold because he thought she was powerless. It was time to prove him wrong. The wedding took place in Ravenfield's private chapel on a Friday morning when frost covered the windows like lace. Rosalind wore a simple gown of pale blue silk, the only formal dress the seamstress had finished in time. Her arm was still splintered, hidden beneath long sleeves. Dorian stood at the altar in formal black, his expression unreadable. The vicar looked uncomfortable, clearly aware this was not a love match. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows spoken without emotion. Rings exchanged with efficiency. When the vicar pronounced them married, Dorian didn't kiss her. He simply offered his hand, and she took it. The Duchess of Ravenfield, the vicar said, and Rosalind felt the weight of the title settle over her like armor. They signed the marriage registry in silence. Mrs. Langley and the butler witnessed, then quietly left. It's done, Dorian said, releasing her hand. You're safe now. Legally, financially, socially, Caspian can't reach you. Thank you. Don't thank me. We both got what we needed. He adjusted his cuffs, preparing to leave. The staff will celebrate tonight. Traditional for a ducal wedding. You should make an appearance. And you? I have work. He paused at the chapel door. You did well today. You looked exactly like a duchess should. It wasn't a compliment about her appearance. It was approval of her performance. Somehow, that meant more. That evening, Rosalind attended the servants' celebration in the great hall. Mrs. Langley had helped her dress in a deep green gown that made her feel almost beautiful despite the splint. The staff toasted her health, wished her happiness, and welcomed her to Ravenfield with genuine warmth. Dorian never appeared. Rosalind found him later in the library, surrounded by papers and ledgers. He looked up when she entered, raising an eyebrow. Shouldn't you be celebrating? He asked. I wanted to thank you. Properly. For everything. You already did. I mean it. She stepped closer. You saved my life. You gave me protection. You're helping me seek justice. I know this marriage serves your purposes, but it saved mine too. Dorian set down his pen, studying her with those pale grey eyes that seemed to see straight through her. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more fragile, more damaged by what happened. I am damaged, Rosalind said quietly. I just refuse to let it show. Something shifted in his expression. Good. Showing weakness in this world gets you killed. Is that why you never show it? I don't have weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses, Your Grace. He stood, walking to the fireplace. For a long moment, he stared at the flames. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "I had a sister, younger than me by 5 years, sweet, kind, everything this family didn't deserve." His voice remained controlled, but Rosalind heard the edge beneath it. "She fell in love with a man Lord Holtworth had chosen for his own daughter. When my sister refused to step aside, there was an accident. Her carriage went off a bridge." "I'm sorry." The driver swore the wheel had been tampered with. But he was a servant, his word meant nothing, and Lord Holtworth had witnesses claiming my sister had been drinking. The inquest ruled it an accident. Dorian's hands clenched. "I've spent 5 years gathering proof. I've never found enough." "Ah, but you never stopped trying." "No, and I never will." He turned to face her. "So when I tell you I'll protect you from them, understand, it's not altruism, it's strategy. You're the weapon I've been waiting for." Rosalind crossed the library until she stood close enough to see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "Then let me be a weapon that actually strikes. Not just bait, not just testimony. Let me fight beside you. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I want them to pay for what they did. To me, to your sister, to all the families they've robbed. I want justice." She held his gaze. "And I want them to know I survived." Dorian studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, we'll do this together. But you follow my lead. No impulsive actions, no confrontations without strategy. Agreed?" "Agreed." He extended his hand. "Then, welcome to the war, Duchess." She shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "Thank you for letting me fight." "Don't thank me yet. War isn't clean, and the Holtworths won't go down easily." That night, alone in her rooms, Rosalind stood at the window watching the moon rise over Ravenfield's gardens. She touched the ring on her finger, heavy gold with the Vale family crest. She was the Duchess of Ravenfield now, protected, armed, ready. Somewhere in London, Caspian believed she was dead, rotting in some forgotten corner of the forest, buried by snow. Soon he'd learn the truth. The woman he'd left in the cold hadn't died. She'd become something far more dangerous. 3 days later, Rosalind stood in Ravenfield's drawing room, listening to Mrs. Langley explain the intricacies of seating arrangements for formal dinners, when a messenger arrived from London. "Your Grace," the young man said breathlessly to Dorian. "Urgent news from Lord Pemberton." Dorian opened the letter, his expression unchanging as he read. Then he looked at Rosalind. "Lady Pemberton has extended an invitation to her weekend house party. It's in 10 days, not 3 weeks as I'd planned." He handed her the letter. "The Holtworths will be there. This is happening sooner than expected." Rosalind read the elegant script. "The Duke and Duchess of Ravenfield are cordially invited to Ashcombe Hall for a weekend celebration of the season." Her hands trembled slightly. 10 days, 10 days until she faced Caspian. "I'm not ready," she admitted. "You're ready enough. Your arm has healed. The tutors say you've mastered the essentials. And more importantly, you're angry." Dorian crossed to her. "That anger will carry you through. Use it. What if I freeze? What if I can't do this? Then you remember what he did to you. You remember that he left you in the cold to die. And you walk into that house party as living proof that he failed." Mrs. Langley stepped forward. "If I may, Your Grace, perhaps the Duchess needs practice, a rehearsal of sorts." Dorian nodded slowly. "Agreed. We'll host a small dinner here, 3 days from now. I'll invite people who matter, minor nobility, a few political allies. You'll practice being the Duchess of Ravenfield in a controlled environment." Rosalind's stomach churned. "And if I fail at that?" "You won't. Because failure isn't an option anymore." He turned to Mrs. Langley. "Arrange it. 6 guests, formal dinner, all the traditional protocols." The next 3 days were a controlled nightmare. Rosalind practiced conversation, memorized names and titles, learned which topics were safe and which would end her credibility. The seamstress delivered 3 new gowns, each more elaborate than the last. The night of the dinner, Rosalind stood in her dressing room studying her reflection. The deep burgundy silk made her look older, more sophisticated. Sapphires, Dorian's mother's apparently, glittered at her throat and ears. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant style that hid the last traces of her injury. She looked like a duchess. She didn't feel like one. A knock at the door. "Come in!" Dorian entered, dressed in formal black and white. He stopped when he saw her, something flickering across his face too quickly to identify. "You look appropriate," he said finally. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an assessment. Are you ready?" "No, but I'll do it anyway." He offered his arm. "That's all I ask." The guests were already assembled in the drawing room when they descended the grand staircase together. Rosalind recognized them from her studies. Lord and Lady Ashford, close political allies of Dorian's. Lord Thornton, a widower with influence in banking. Lady Grantham, an older woman known for her sharp wit and sharper judgment. And Sir Edmund Price, a barrister with connections to Parliament. "The Duke and Duchess of Ravenfield," the butler announced. All eyes turned to Rosalind. She felt their assessment like physical weight, searching for flaws, measuring her worthiness, judging whether she belonged. Dorian's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. A brief touch, barely noticeable, but steady. "Lord Ashford, Lady Ashford," Dorian said smoothly. "May I present my wife, Rosalind?" Rosalind curtsied exactly as her tutor had taught her. "I'm delighted to meet you." Lady Ashford smiled, and it seemed genuine. "And you, Your Grace. Ravenfield has been without a duchess far too long." Dinner was a carefully orchestrated dance. Rosalind remembered which fork to use, which topics to pursue, how to deflect questions about her family without seeming evasive. She laughed at Lord Thornton's jokes, complimented Lady Grantham's brooch, and engaged Sir Edmund in discussion about legal reforms for widows' rights, a topic she actually cared about. Dorian watched from the head of the table, his expression neutral. But when Lady Ashford mentioned the embezzlement scandals plaguing London's investment houses, Rosalind saw him lean forward slightly. "It's unconscionable," Lady Ashford was saying. "These families trust their savings to supposedly reputable men, and they're systematically robbed." "My late husband's estate was managed by such an investment house," Lady Grantham added. "I've often wondered if the returns were as honest as claimed." Rosalind saw her opening. "Forgive me, but which house managed your husband's estate?" "Holtworth and Associates. Do you know it?" The room went silent. Every eye turned to Rosalind. She met Lady Grantham's gaze. "I know it well. And if I were you, I'd demand a full audit of your account." "Why would you suggest that?" Dorian's voice cut through the tension. "My wife has reason to believe the Holtworths may not be as trustworthy as their reputation suggests." "What kind of reason?" Lord Thornton asked. Rosalind chose her words carefully. "I was briefly acquainted with their family practices. What I observed troubled me. Investments that existed only on paper, returns that seemed manufactured. I can't prove anything definitively, but I would never trust them with my own funds." "That's quite an accusation," Sir Edmund said, "even implied." "It's an observation based on personal experience. Nothing more." Lady Grantham set down her wineglass with a sharp click. "I think I will demand that audit. Thank you, Your Grace." The conversation shifted, but Rosalind felt the shift in the room. She'd planted seeds, small ones, but seeds nonetheless. After the guests departed, Dorian found her in the library, nursing a glass of sherry. "You did well tonight," he said. "I felt like I was walking on glass." "You were, and you didn't break." He poured himself whiskey. "Lady Grantham will order that audit. When she finds discrepancies, and she will, she'll talk. The rumors will spread. Is that enough? It's a start. Reputations crumble from small cracks. He sat across from her. You planted the first crack tonight. Rosalind studied him. You arranged this, didn't you? You invited Lady Grantham specifically because you knew she'd invested with them. I arrange everything. That's how I win. And what happens when we actually face them? At Lady Pemberton's party, Dorian's expression hardened. We make them bleed. The week before the house party passed in a storm of preparation. More lessons, more rehearsals, more strategic planning. Dorian drilled her on every name she'd encounter, every potential conversation, every possible trap. Caspian will try to discredit you, he said during one of their evening sessions. He'll suggest you're mentally unstable, that the accident damaged your mind, that you're making wild accusations for attention. How do I counter that? By being calmer than he is, more rational, more credible. Let him get angry. You stay composed. The night before they were scheduled to leave for Ashcombe Hall, Rosalind couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Caspian's face as he pushed her from the carriage, kept feeling the cold, the certainty that she would die. Around midnight she gave up and went down to the library, seeking distraction in books. She found Dorian there, standing at the window with a glass of whiskey, staring out at the gardens. Couldn't sleep? He asked without turning. No. You? I don't sleep much. He glanced at her. Nervous about tomorrow. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He turned to face her fully. Rosalind, I need you to understand something. What we're doing is dangerous. The Holtworths won't take our accusations lightly. They'll fight back. Hard. I know. And they'll target you, because you're the weakness they think I have. Are you? Do you have that weakness? Dorian was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm starting to. The admission hung between them like the snow that had fallen the night he found her. Rosalind crossed the library until she stood close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes. For what it's worth, I'm grateful you found me that night. Even if it was just strategy, even if I'm just a weapon, I'm grateful to be alive. You're not just a weapon. His voice was rough. Not anymore. Then what am I? He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. His hand was warm, calloused, gentle. I don't know yet, but I know I'd fight to keep you safe, and that's more than strategy. Rosalind's breath caught. Dorian, tomorrow we face them, he interrupted, dropping his hand. Together. And whatever happens, you stay close to me, understood? Understood. Get some rest. We leave at dawn. She started to leave, then turned back. Dorian, thank you for seeing me as more than just useful. He didn't answer, but his eyes said what his words wouldn't. That night, Rosalind dreamed of snow and cold and darkness. But this time, when she woke, she wasn't alone in the forest. She was standing in the library at Ravenfield, and Dorian was reaching for her hand. Ashcombe Hall rose from manicured parkland like something from a fairy tale, all cream stone and soaring windows, surrounded by gardens that seemed to go on forever. As their carriage approached, Rosalind counted at least a dozen other vehicles already present. Lady Pemberton invited 40 guests, Dorian said, watching her reaction, all carefully chosen for influence, wealth, or scandal value. Which category do we fall into? All three. He adjusted his cravat. Remember the plan. We arrive together. We're polite, but reserved. We observe. We don't engage the Holtworths directly unless they approach us. And if Caspian sees me, he will see you. That's the point. Let him realize you survived. Let him wonder how much you've told me. Let him panic. The carriage stopped. Footman rushed to open the door. Dorian descended first, then offered his hand to Rosalind. She took it, stepping out into afternoon sunlight and the curious gazes of at least 20 guests who'd been strolling the grounds. The whispers started immediately. "Is that the new Duchess of Ravenfield? I heard she was nobody. A scandal. She doesn't look like nobody." Rosalind kept her spine straight, her hands steady on Dorian's arm. She wore deep emerald silk that brought out the colour in her eyes, and diamonds at her throat that proclaimed her status beyond question. Lady Pemberton herself waited at the entrance, a formidable woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and sharper judgment. "Your Grace," she said to Dorian with a curtsy, "how delightful to have you, and this must be your bride. Lady Pemberton, may I present my wife, Rosalind, Duchess of Ravenfield." Rosalind curtsied perfectly. "Thank you for including us in such distinguished company, Lady Pemberton." "Distinguished?" "Yes." "Well." Lady Pemberton's eyes swept over Rosalind, assessing everything. "You're younger than I expected. I hope that won't be disappointing." "We'll see. Come, I'll show you to your rooms. We dine at 8. As they followed Lady Pemberton through halls, lined with portraits, and into a wing of guest suites, Rosalind heard voices from the drawing room they passed. One of them was Caspian's. Her steps faltered. Dorian's hand covered hers immediately. "Steady," he murmured. "Not yet." Their rooms were luxurious. A suite with sitting area, bedroom, and private balcony overlooking the gardens. As soon as the door closed behind Lady Pemberton's housekeeper, Rosalind sank into a chair. "He's here. Right now, in this house. I know. What if he recognizes me immediately? What if he causes a scene?" Dorian knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Look at me. You are the Duchess of Ravenfield. You outrank him. You have me beside you, and you have the truth on your side. He's the one who should be afraid. But, Rosalind," his voice was firm, "you survived being left to die. You survived learning to be a duchess in 6 weeks. You survived a dinner party with people looking for any excuse to dismiss you. You can survive seeing him again." She looked at their joined hands. "When did you start believing in me? When you negotiated terms while lying in a sickbed with broken bones? Maybe before." He stood. "Rest before dinner. I'll come collect you at 7:30. Where are you going?" "To observe, to listen, to see who knows what." He paused at the door. "And to make sure certain people know you're here." After he left, Rosalind stood on the balcony, watching guests stroll through gardens below. She saw Lady Grantham speaking with 2 other older women, saw Lord Ashford in conversation with a man she didn't recognize, and then she saw him, Caspian Holtworth, standing near a fountain, laughing at something his companion said. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, fair-haired, handsome in a way that seemed designed to deceive. He wore confidence like expensive cologne. He thought she was dead. He had no idea she was standing 2 floors above him, watching. Rosalind's hands clenched on the balcony railing. Tonight, he'd learn the truth. The question was, would she survive the revelation? Dinner was held in Ashcombe Hall's grand dining room, a space designed to showcase wealth and intimidate guests. 40 people sat at a table that gleamed with silver and crystal. Lady Pemberton held court at the head, orchestrating conversation like a conductor with an orchestra. Rosalind sat beside Dorian, 3 seats from Lady Pemberton. Across from her sat Lady Ashford. Down the table she could see Caspian and his parents, Lord and Lady Holtworth, looking every inch the respectable aristocrats they pretended to be. Caspian hadn't seen her yet. He was engaged in conversation with the woman beside him, his attention focused away from Rosalind. "Breathe," Dorian murmured. "I am breathing." "You're holding your breath. Relax. Let him discover you naturally." The first course was served. Conversation flowed around neutral topics: weather, hunting, the upcoming season in London. Rosalind participated where expected, smiled when appropriate, and waited. It was Lady Pemberton who made the introduction inevitable. "Lord Holtworth," she called down the table. Have you met the new Duchess of Ravenfield? I don't believe you were in town for their wedding." Caspian looked up from his plate. His eyes found Rosalind, and his face went absolutely white. The fork dropped from his hand, clattering against china. Conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look. Excuse me, I apologize." Caspian fumbled for his fork, his hands shaking visibly. "The Duchess of Ravenfield, you said?" "Indeed. The Duke married very recently." Lady Pemberton's eyes sharpened. "Are you quite all right, Lord Holtworth? You've gone pale. Forgive me, a moment of... I thought the Duchess reminded me of someone. Someone who..." He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "Someone who died," Rosalind finished silently. "How interesting," Dorian said, his voice carrying down the table. "Do you know my wife, Lord Holtworth?" Every eye was on them now, the entire table watching. Caspian's mother stepped in smoothly. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure, Your Grace. Welcome to our circle." Rosalind met Lady Holtworth's eyes. "Thank you, though I believe your son and I have met. Briefly, before my marriage." "Have you?" Lady Holtworth's smile didn't waver. "How lovely." Caspian had recovered enough to speak. "I must have been mistaken, forgive me. The Duchess is..." He seemed to search for words. "Unexpected. I'll take that as a compliment," Rosalind said smoothly. Dorian's hand found hers under the table. A brief squeeze. Approval. The conversation moved on, but Rosalind felt Caspian's eyes on her for the rest of the meal, saw his mind working, trying to understand how she was alive, how she'd become a duchess, how she was sitting at this table instead of rotting in the forest. Let him wonder. After dinner, the party moved to the drawing room for cards and conversation. Rosalind found herself surrounded by curious guests, all wanting to know about the mysterious new duchess who'd appeared from nowhere. She told them a carefully edited version, a whirlwind courtship, a private wedding, her gratitude for Dorian's protection, nothing about being left to die, nothing about Holtworth crimes. Not yet. Dorian stayed close, watching Caspian watch Rosalind. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone aware that something was happening, but not quite certain what. Around 10, Rosalind stepped onto the terrace for air. She needed a moment away from the watching eyes, the whispered speculation. She heard footsteps behind her. "You should be dead." Rosalind turned. Caspian stood in the doorway, his earlier charm replaced by something darker. "But I'm not," she said calmly. "How? I left you in the middle of nowhere, in a storm. You were injured. You should have frozen. Someone found me, someone who actually cared whether I lived or died." Ravenfield. Caspian's lip curled. "Of course. My family's greatest enemy. You went straight to him." "I didn't go to him. He found me dying in the snow. Unlike you, he chose to save me rather than leave me there." Caspian moved closer, his voice dropping. "What did you tell him?" "Everything. You're lying. If you'd told him about the ledgers, he'd have already moved against my family." "Perhaps he's waiting, building a case, making sure every accusation is ironclad." Rosalind held her ground. "You tried to kill me, Caspian. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" "I should have made certain you were dead." "Yes, you should have." A new voice joined them. Dorian stepped onto the terrace, his presence immediately protective. "But you didn't, and now she's beyond your reach." Caspian laughed, but it sounded desperate. "Beyond my reach? She's a nobody who married above her station. One wrong word, one scandal, and society will tear her apart. She's the Duchess of Ravenfield. She outranks you, and she's under my protection." Dorian's voice was ice. "If you threaten her again, I'll destroy you. Not through politics, not through strategy, personally. You can't prove anything. Not yet. But I will. And when I do, everyone will know what you did. To her, to my sister, to every family you've robbed." Caspian's mask cracked. "Your sister was an accident." "My sister was murdered, and I will prove it. Dorian stepped between Rosalind and Caspian. "This conversation is over. Return to the drawing room and stay away from my wife." For a moment, Caspian looked like he might argue. Then he saw the absolute certainty in Dorian's eyes and backed down. "This isn't finished," he muttered. "No," Rosalind said, "it's not. But it will be. Soon." Caspian stalked back inside. Rosalind's hands were shaking now that the confrontation was over. Dorian turned to her immediately. "Are you all right?" "I stood my ground. I didn't collapse. I think that counts as all right." "You were magnificent." His hands cupped her face, searching her eyes. "But we need to be more careful. He's panicking. That makes him dangerous." "Good. Let him panic. Let him feel what I felt." "Rosalind." "He tried to kill me, Dorian. He left me in the cold to die. Now he knows I survived, and he's terrified. That's justice." Dorian's thumb brushed her cheek. "Justice, yes, but not at the cost of your safety. Promise me you won't confront him alone again." "I promise." They stood there for a moment, his hands still on her face, the distance between them shrinking with each shared breath. Then voices approached from inside and they stepped apart. "We should return," Dorian said, "before people talk." "They're already talking." "Then let's give them something worth discussing." He offered his arm. Rosalind took it, and they walked back into the drawing room together, a united front against everyone who would try to separate them. Lady Pemberton watched them with calculating eyes. Lady Grantham whispered to her companions. And across the room, Lord Holtworth's expression was thunderous. The opening shot had been fired. Now the real battle would begin. The next morning dawned bright and cold. Lady Pemberton had organized a traditional garden breakfast, tables set up on the lawn, guests strolling through elaborate flower beds, everything designed for maximum social interaction. Rosalind wore pale rose silk and a determined smile. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the confrontation with Caspian over and over. But she'd learned her lines, memorized her role, and now she would perform. "Stay visible," Dorian had instructed over coffee in their rooms. "Engage with the guests. Let them see you as confident, graceful, completely unshakable. Every conversation is an opportunity to plant doubt about the Holtworths. And if Caspian approaches me, he won't. Not publicly. He can't afford to look obsessed with you. It raises too many questions." Dorian adjusted his cufflinks. "But his mother will. She's the real strategist in that family." He was right. Rosalind had barely filled her plate when Lady Holtworth materialized beside her, all false warmth and calculated charm. "Your Grace," Lady Holtworth said with a curtsy, "I wanted to apologize for my son's behavior last evening. He's been under considerable strain lately." "Has he?" Rosalind kept her voice light. "I'm sorry to hear that. Business difficulties. You know how it is. The financial world can be so unpredictable." Lady Holtworth's smile didn't reach her eyes. "But tell me, where did you and the Duke meet? The announcement was so sudden, I'm afraid we missed all the delightful details." "It was rather sudden," Rosalind agreed. "Sometimes fate intervenes when you least expect it." "Fate. How romantic." Lady Holtworth paused. "Forgive me, but you seem so familiar. Have we met before?" "I don't believe so." "Strange. Caspian said the same thing, that you reminded him of someone." She tilted her head. "He was briefly engaged, you know, to a young woman from a modest family, but she disappeared before the wedding. Tragic, really." Rosalind's fingers tightened on her plate. "How unfortunate." "Indeed. We never did discover what became of her. Some said she fled, overcome by the prospect of marrying above her station. Others suggested darker possibilities." Lady Holtworth's eyes were sharp. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Before Rosalind could answer, Dorian appeared at her elbow. "Lady Holtworth," he said pleasantly, "I hope you're not monopolizing my wife. There are at least a dozen people eager to make her acquaintance." Of course, Your Grace. I was just fishing for information, Dorian finished. How transparent, if you'll excuse us. He guided Rosalind away, his hand steady at her back. She knows, Rosalind whispered. Or she suspects. Let her suspect. She can't prove anything. And every time she tries to corner you, she looks desperate. He led her toward a group of younger guests. Now smile, Lady Pemberton's niece has been dying to meet you. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of introductions and carefully modulated conversations. Rosalind discovered she had a talent for social warfare, the art of saying nothing while implying everything, of smiling while delivering subtle cuts, of appearing gracious while planting seeds of doubt. The Holtworths seem very concerned with financial matters, she mentioned to Lady Pemberton's niece. I do hope their investors are being well cared for. I've heard whispers, Lady Thornbury confided during a walk through the rose garden, about discrepancies in the Holtworth accounts, nothing concrete, but where there's smoke. Quite, Rosalind agreed. My husband always says that reputation is built on truth. When the foundation cracks, everything collapses. By afternoon, the whispers had spread. Rosalind heard fragments of conversation as she passed. Investigation, questionable investments. Perhaps not as stable as they claim. Caspian heard them too. She saw his jaw tighten, saw his parents exchange concerned glances. Good. Let them feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. That evening's entertainment was cards in the Great Hall. Rosalind partnered with Dorian for whist, facing Lord and Lady Ashford across the table. The game was secondary to the conversation. Politics, scandal, the ever-changing fortunes of London's elite. I understand Lady Grantham has ordered an audit of her accounts, Lord Ashford mentioned casually, with Holtworth and Associates. Has she? Dorian's voice was carefully neutral. I'm sure it's purely routine. Of course, though one does wonder why such a respectable firm would need routine verification. One wonders indeed. Across the room, Rosalind saw Lord Holtworth's face darken. He excused himself from his card game and left the hall. Trouble in paradise, Lady Ashford murmured. The evening concluded with music. Lady Pemberton's daughter performed on pianoforte, while guests pretended to appreciate her mediocre talent. Rosalind stood near the windows, watching the reflection of candlelight on glass, when she noticed Caspian moving toward the hallway. Alone. She shouldn't follow. Dorian had made her promise not to confront Caspian without him. But something in Caspian's expression, panic, barely concealed, made her curious. She waited 60 seconds, then slipped into the corridor. Caspian was in the library, speaking to someone in urgent whispers. Rosalind pressed herself against the wall outside, listening. Can't stay quiet much longer, a woman's voice said. Rosalind recognized it, the housekeeper from the Holtworth London residence. The questions are getting louder. Lady Grantham's audit will find the discrepancies. Then we bury the evidence, Caspian hissed. Destroy the original ledgers. Blame the bookkeeper. Make it look like isolated theft, not systematic fraud. And the Duchess? She knows nothing she can prove. It's her word against ours. Who will believe a nobody who appeared from nowhere? The Duke will believe her. The Duke is blinded by sentiment. He thinks he's protecting her. But if she becomes a liability to him, if associating with her damages his reputation, he'll cut her loose. They all do eventually. Rosalind's nails bit into her palms. What about the sister? The housekeeper asked. Rosalind went cold. What sister? The Duchess has a younger sister, 15, living with impoverished parents in Hampshire, very vulnerable, very accessible. No, Caspian said, but he sounded uncertain. If something were to happen, not fatal, just frightening, the Duchess might reconsider her allegations, especially if she understood that her cooperation would ensure her family's safety. That's blackmail. That's strategy. Your father taught you better than this, Caspian. Eliminate threats, protect the family name, do what must be done. Rosalind had heard enough. She turned to leave, to find Dorian, to warn him, and walked straight into Lady Haltworth. "Eavesdropping, Your Grace?" Lady Haltworth's voice was silk over steel. How terribly unbecoming. "I was looking for the powder room. In the library corridor? How unfortunate." Lady Haltworth's eyes narrowed. "Whatever you think you heard, I'd advise you to forget it. Making accusations without proof is dangerous, especially when one's own family is so exposed." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice, from someone who knows how this world works." She stepped closer. "You're playing a game you don't understand, my dear. The Duke may protect you now, but the moment you become more trouble than you're worth, he'll discard you, just like Caspian did." "I'm nothing like I was with Caspian." "No, you're worse. You've developed delusions of power." Lady Haltworth's smile was cruel. "But you're still the same frightened girl he threw away. And deep down, you know it." Footsteps approached. Dorian appeared at the end of the corridor, his expression thunderous. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Lady Haltworth smoothed her skirts. "Not at all, Your Grace. The Duchess and I were just having a friendly chat. Wasn't that right, my dear?" Rosalind met Dorian's eyes. She saw the question there. What happened? "Perfectly friendly," she said. "Lady Haltworth was just leaving." After Lady Haltworth swept away, Dorian took Rosalind's arm and guided her to an empty sitting room. "What did she say to you?" "They're planning to destroy evidence, the ledgers, and—" She took a breath. "They mentioned my sister. They're considering using her as leverage against me." Dorian's jaw clenched. "Where is your sister now?" "Hampshire, with my parents. They have no money for protection, no guards, nothing." "That changes tonight." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, scribbling rapidly. "I'll send riders to Hampshire immediately. Your family will be brought to Ravenfield under guard. They'll be safe. That will take days. What if I have people in Hampshire, former soldiers, loyal and discreet? They'll reach your family by tomorrow evening." He looked up. "Trust me. I do trust you. That's what terrifies me." Something softened in his expression. "Why does that terrify you?" "Because I've spent my whole life being used by people who claimed to care. My parents used me to settle debts. Caspian used me to access my family's connections. Even you. You married me because I was useful." She looked away. "How do I know when someone actually cares versus when they're just maintaining a valuable asset?" Dorian was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed to her, tilting her chin up until she had to meet his eyes. "The difference," he said quietly, "is that I would burn every strategic advantage I have if it meant keeping you safe. That's not asset management. That's something I didn't plan for and don't quite know how to handle. Dorian, I'm not good with sentiment. I'm better with action. So let me act." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Let me protect your family. Let me destroy the people who hurt you. And maybe eventually you'll believe that I chose you because I wanted to, not because I needed to." Rosalind's breath caught. "When did that change?" "I don't know. Somewhere between finding you in the snow and watching you stand up to Lady Haltworth without flinching. Somewhere between strategy and—" He seemed to search for the word. And this." He kissed her. Not the perfunctory touch of their wedding ceremony. Not a strategic performance for observers. This was real, his hands cupping her face, her fingers clutching his coat, the distance between them collapsing into something neither had planned, but both needed. When they finally pulled apart, Rosalind was breathless. "That was unplanned," Dorian finished, "but not unwelcome, I hope?" "Definitely not unwelcome." A throat cleared behind them. They sprang apart to find Lady Pemberton standing in the doorway, one eyebrow raised. "How delightful," she said dryly. "Young love, though perhaps not in my sitting room." "Apologies, Lady Pemberton," Dorian said smoothly. "We were just—" "Oh, I know what you were just. And normally I'd be charmed. But I'm afraid we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Lady Pemberton's expression turned serious. "Lord Holtworth has requested an audience with me. He's making allegations about the Duchess, quite serious ones, and he's demanding I revoke her invitation to the house party." They stood in Lady Pemberton's private study, Rosalind, Dorian, and their hostess. Lord Holtworth waited in the drawing room, along with his wife and Caspian, preparing to present their case. "What exactly is he alleging?" Dorian asked. "That your wife is an impostor of sorts, that she was engaged to his son under false pretenses, stole financial information from his family, then orchestrated her own disappearance to create scandal." Lady Pemberton settled into her chair. "He claims she's now using her marriage to you to spread malicious lies about his business." "That's absurd," Rosalind said. "Is it?" "Because he has a rather compelling narrative. A nobody bride who vanished before the wedding, then suddenly reappeared as a duchess married to his family's greatest enemy. It does raise questions." "Questions I can answer," Dorian said. "I'm sure you can. But Lord Holtworth has influence, and he's threatening to make this very public very quickly. Before we meet with him, I need to know the truth. All of it." Lady Pemberton looked at Rosalind. "What really happened between you and Caspian Holtworth?" Rosalind glanced at Dorian. He nodded. "She told the story. All of it. The arranged engagement, finding the ledgers, confronting Caspian, the carriage ride into the forest, being thrown into the snow, Dorian finding her, the marriage offer. Everything." Lady Pemberton listened without interruption. When Rosalind finished, the room was silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock. "That," Lady Pemberton said finally, "is quite a tale. It's the truth, perhaps. But it's also unprovable. You have no witnesses to the abandonment. No documentation of the ledgers you claim to have seen, just your word against a respected family's reputation." "She has my word," Dorian said, "and my support, which the Holtworths will claim is bias. You hate them, everyone knows it. Of course you'd believe any accusation against them." Lady Pemberton stood, pacing to the window. "Understand, I have no love for the Holtworths. Lord Holtworth tried to cheat me in a property deal 5 years ago. I've never forgotten. But I also can't make decisions based on personal grudges. I need proof." "What would constitute proof?" Rosalind asked. "Evidence of the embezzlement, documentation of the abandonment, something concrete that can't be dismissed as hearsay or revenge." Dorian pulled the small notebook from his pocket. "I have bank records showing irregular transfers from Holtworth and Associates accounts. I have testimony from Lady Grantham about suspicious investment returns. I have circumstantial evidence, suggestive but not conclusive." Lady Pemberton turned to face them. "Here's what I propose. I'll allow you both to remain for the house party, but I'm also granting the Holtworths the opportunity to present their version of events, tomorrow at the garden tea, in front of all 40 guests. A public trial," Rosalind said quietly. "A public conversation. Both sides state their case. Let society judge." "Society will judge based on reputation and rank," Dorian said. "The Holtworths have both. And so do you, Your Grace. Use it." Lady Pemberton's expression softened slightly. "I'm giving you a chance to expose them, but you need to be strategic. Emotional appeals won't work. You need facts, witnesses, something undeniable." After they left Lady Pemberton's study, Rosalind felt the weight of tomorrow settling over her like a shroud. "We don't have undeniable proof," she said as they walked back to their rooms. "We have pieces, fragments, nothing that will hold up against their denials. Then we get creative." Dorian opened the door to their suite. "Tell me everything you remember about those ledgers, every detail, names, numbers, dates." They spent the next 3 hours reconstructing what Rosalind had seen. Dorian took notes, cross-referencing with his own research, building a timeline of suspicious transactions. "This one," he said, pointing to a notation. £60,000 supposedly invested in a textile mill in Manchester, but I know that mill. It burned down 2 years before this investment was supposedly made. Can you prove that? I own the property now. I have the deed, the insurance records, everything. He made another note. If Holtworth claims that investment exists, I can prove he's lying. They worked until past midnight, building their case piece by piece. It wasn't perfect, but it might be enough. Finally, exhausted, Rosalind set down her pen. What if it's not enough? What if they deny everything and society believes them? Dorian looked up from his notes. Then we lose this battle, but not the war. Easy for you to say. You'll still be the Duke of Ravenfield. I'll be the scorned bride who lied. No. He stood, crossing to her. If they win tomorrow, we both lose. Because I'm not letting them take you. We're in this together. Even if it costs you everything. I already told you, you're not a cost. You're a choice I keep making. He pulled her to her feet. Tomorrow, we face them together. We tell the truth. And we let the consequences fall where they may. I'm frightened. So am I. But I'm more frightened of letting them win. He kissed her forehead, a gentle touch that somehow steadied her more than words could. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow, we fight. That night, Rosalind dreamed of snow and cold and darkness, but this time, when she reached out, Dorian's hand was there, and she wasn't alone anymore. The garden tea began at 3 o'clock under a sky that threatened rain. All 40 guests assembled on the lawn, arranged in careful clusters around small tables, laden with sandwiches and cakes that no one was eating. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Lady Pemberton stood at the centre, a queen surveying her domain. Lord and Lady Holtworth stood to her right, Caspian beside them. Rosalind and Dorian stood to her left. Thank you all for attending, Lady Pemberton said, her voice carrying across the lawn. We have a matter to address. Lord Holtworth has raised concerns about the Duchess of Ravenfield. Serious concerns. I've decided that rather than allowing rumours to fester, we should address them openly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lord Holtworth, you have the floor. Lord Holtworth stepped forward, every inch the wronged patriarch. Thank you, Lady Pemberton. It pains me to raise this issue, but duty demands it. The woman you know as the Duchess of Ravenfield was, until recently, engaged to my son. She had access to my private papers, my business affairs, my family's confidence, and she betrayed that trust. That's not... Rosalind started. Dorian's hand on her arm stopped her. Let him finish. Let him commit to his lies. Lord Holtworth continued. She stole confidential financial information. When confronted, she fled rather than face the consequences of her actions. My son was devastated. We searched for her, fearing the worst. And then, mysteriously, she reappeared, married to my family's greatest political rival. He turned to face the crowd directly. I submit that this marriage is a sham. A calculated move to damage my family's reputation using lies and stolen information. The Duke may be infatuated, but he's been deceived. The crowd erupted in whispers. Do you have evidence of this theft? Lady Pemberton asked. I have the testimony of my household staff. I have records showing she had unauthorized access to my study, and I have the timing. She disappears, then reappears as a duchess making wild accusations. The pattern is clear. Wild accusations, Dorian said quietly. Such as? That my business practices are fraudulent. That I've embezzled from investors. Complete fantasy designed to destroy my reputation. Is it? Dorian stepped forward. Because I've been investigating your business practices, Lord Holtworth, and I've found some interesting discrepancies. Based on information stolen by your wife, based on public records, bank transactions, investment registries. Dorian pulled papers from his coat. For instance, this investment in a Manchester textile mill, £60,000, supposedly invested 3 years ago. Would you like to explain how you invested in a mill that had burned down 2 years prior? Lord Holtworth's expression flickered. There must be an error in the records. Or an error in your ledgers. Which is it? This is precisely the kind of manipulation I'm talking about. Taking legitimate clerical errors and twisting them into fraud. One error is clerical. 37 errors suggest a pattern. Dorian's voice was cold and precise. I have documentation of 37 investments that either don't exist, are misrepresented, or show returns that are mathematically impossible. Would you like to explain them all as clerical errors? The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. Lady Holtworth stepped forward. This is slander. You have no proof of wrongdoing, only suspicion and spite. I have testimony, Rosalind said, finding her voice, from people you've defrauded. From malcontents and gossips, Lady Holtworth shot back. No one will believe. I believe her, a new voice called out. Lady Grantham stepped forward, her face set with determination. I received the results of my audit yesterday. The investment returns Holtworth and Associates reported to me were falsified, 30% higher than what actually existed. When I confronted them, they blamed bookkeeping mistakes. But those mistakes have been happening for years. Lady Grantham, Lord Holtworth said, his voice strained, surely we can discuss this privately. No. I'm tired of private discussions where you make excuses and promise corrections that never come. She turned to the crowd. How many others here have invested with Holtworth and Associates? How many have verified their returns recently? Several hands raised uncertainly. I suggest you do so. Immediately. Lady Grantham's voice was steel. Because I suspect you'll find the same discrepancies I did. Lord Thornton stepped forward next. I've had concerns for months about irregular reporting. I dismissed them as paranoia. But now... This is ridiculous, Caspian burst out. You're all being manipulated by a vengeful woman with an agenda. Then let's talk about that woman, Dorian said quietly. Tell them what you did to her, Lord Caspian. Tell them why she disappeared. Caspian's face went white. I did nothing. She fled. You threw her from a moving carriage in the middle of a snowstorm and left her to die. Gasps erupted from the crowd. That's insane. Caspian looked to his parents for support. She's clearly unstable, making wild claims. I found her, Dorian said, his voice carrying, half frozen in the snow with broken bones and a head injury. She told me who did it, and every detail she provided matched the evidence, the location, the timing, the injuries. There's no proof of any of this. Actually, a small voice said from the back of the crowd, there is. Everyone turned. A young woman in servant's clothing stood there, trembling but determined. Who are you? Lady Pemberton asked. I was the housekeeper at the Holtworth London residence. She glanced at Rosalind. I'm sorry, Your Grace. They threatened my position. They said I'd lose everything if I spoke. What do you have to say? Dorian asked gently. I heard them planning it. Lord Caspian and his mother. They talked about taking Miss Greymont, as she was then, on a carriage ride, about leaving her somewhere she wouldn't be found. I thought they were joking, but then she disappeared, and they told everyone she'd run away. The woman's voice broke. I should have said something. I should have stopped them. You're lying, Lady Holtworth shrieked. I'll have you arrested for slander. Then arrest me, but I'm telling the truth. The woman looked at the crowd. And I'm not the only one who knows. Other staff heard things, saw things. We were all too frightened to speak because the Holtworths destroy anyone who crosses them. This is absurd. Lord Holtworth's composure was cracking. You can't believe a disgruntled servant over a family with documented financial fraud and a suspicious pattern of silencing critics. Lord Thornton's voice was sharp. I'm beginning to think the Duchess's accusations deserve serious investigation. Investigation? Caspian laughed desperately. Based on what? The word of a nobody and a servant? You're all being manipulated by Ravenfield. This is his revenge for political defeats. This is justice for attempted murder. Dorian corrected coldly. You tried to kill my wife. You failed, and now everyone knows what you are. You can't prove any of this. I don't need to prove it in a court. I need to prove it here. Dorian gestured to the assembled guests. Look around, Caspian. These people make reputations and break them. They decide who's welcome and who's cast out. And right now, they're deciding about you. The silence that followed was damning. Lady Pemberton cleared her throat. Lord Holtworth, Lady Holtworth, Lord Caspian, I believe it would be best if you departed Ashcombe Hall immediately. You can't be serious, Lord Holtworth blustered. Based on unfounded accusations based on testimony from multiple sources, documented financial irregularities, and the fact that your story has more holes than a sieve. Lady Pemberton's voice was final. I will not have attempted murderers and fraudsters in my home. You have 1 hour to pack and leave. This is outrageous. You demand nothing. You're lucky I'm not summoning the magistrate. She turned to her staff. See them out. As the Holtworths were escorted away, Caspian still protesting, his parents silent with fury, the garden erupted in conversation. Rosalind felt her knees weaken. Dorian's arm was immediately around her waist, supporting her. It's done, he murmured. You did it. We did it, she corrected. Lady Grantham approached, her expression apologetic. Your Grace, I should have spoken sooner. I suspected for months, but feared being wrong. You spoke when it mattered, Rosalind said. Thank you. One by one, other guests approached. Some offering support, others simply curious about the woman who'd survived attempted murder and stood up to one of London's most powerful families. By the time they retreated to their rooms hours later, Rosalind was exhausted and overwhelmed. What happens now? She asked, sinking onto the settee. Now? The rumors spread. The investigations begin. Other investors will demand audits. The Holtworths' reputation will crumble. Dorian poured her wine. And you'll be known as the woman who exposed them. I'll be notorious. You'll be respected. There's a difference. Rosalind sipped the wine, letting its warmth settle her nerves. The housekeeper. Did you arrange for her to be here? I sent word 3 days ago that I'd protect any Holtworth servant willing to testify. She's the only one brave enough to come forward. Yet. He sat beside her. More will follow. That's how these things work. One crack becomes a flood. And my sister arrived at Ravenfield this morning with your parents, all safe, all protected. Rosalind closed her eyes, relief washing over her. You kept your promise. I always will. She opened her eyes, looking at the man who'd saved her life, married her for strategy, and somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. When did this become real? She asked quietly. When did we stop pretending? Dorian was quiet for a moment. Then, for me, the night you negotiated terms from a sickbed, I realized you weren't going to be easy to use or control. You were going to be a partner, and I'd never had one of those before. And for me, Rosalind thought back. The first time you held me after a nightmare, you said I was safe, and I believed you. Are you? Safe with me? Yes. Though perhaps not in the way you meant. She set down her wineglass. I'm not safe from feeling things I didn't plan, from trusting someone I shouldn't, from falling for the man who was supposed to be strategy. Dorian's breath caught. Rosalind, I know this wasn't supposed to be real. I know we married for practical reasons, but somewhere between then and now, it became real for me. And I needed you to know that before we go back to Ravenfield and pretend to be a normal duke and duchess with a normal marriage. He cupped her face in his hands. There's nothing normal about us. And I don't want there to be. What do you want? This, you, every complicated, unpredictable, extraordinary moment. He kissed her softly. I found you in the cold, but you brought me back to life. Dorian, I love you, he said simply. I didn't plan to, but I do, and I'm not taking it back. Rosalind felt tears prick her eyes. You're supposed to be cold and strategic. I am. Loving you is the most strategic thing I've ever done. He smiled. You make me better, stronger, more human. How could I not love that? She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into the connection, gratitude and trust, and the terrifying vulnerability of being completely seen. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and laughing, Rosalind realized something. She'd been left in the cold to die by a man who'd pretended to love her, but she'd been found by a man who taught her what real love looked like, messy and strategic, and absolutely worth fighting for. 3 months later, Rosalind stood in the great hall of Ravenfield Manor, watching winter sunlight stream through the tall windows. The room had been transformed, no longer a cold space of portraits and history, but a warm gathering place, filled with life. 15 women sat at tables scattered throughout the hall, learning skills that would help them find employment. Sewing, accounting, reading, writing. Women who'd been abandoned, abused, or left with nothing, just like Rosalind had been. She called it the Ravenfield Women's Refuge. Dorian called it her army. Mrs. Langley approached with a ledger. 3 more applications this week, Your Grace. Word is spreading. Can we accommodate them? The East Wing has space for at least 10 more, and His Grace has already approved the renovations. Rosalind smiled. Dorian had opposed the refuge initially, concerned about security, about Rosalind making herself a target. But he'd come around when he realized how important it was to her. Now he funded it completely, asked for no recognition, and personally interviewed every man who came near the property. Your Grace, one of the women called. There's a visitor for you. Rosalind turned to see a young woman in the doorway, maybe 19, well-dressed, but with eyes that carried too much knowledge. Lady Caroline Holtworth, the woman said with a curtsy. Caspian's cousin. May I speak with you? Rosalind gestured to a private corner. Of course. Once they were seated, Caroline spoke quickly. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I needed to tell you. Caspian is in debtor's prison. His parents fled to the continent. The authorities are still searching for them. I heard. What you didn't hear is that there were others, besides you. Caroline's voice trembled. Other women he courted, defrauded, discarded. I found letters, testimonies my uncle had paid people to hide. Caspian has been doing this for years. Rosalind felt ice in her veins. How many? At least 7 that I've found, maybe more. Caroline pulled papers from her reticule. I've been gathering evidence, trying to find these women to help them, but most are too frightened or ashamed to come forward. Why bring this to me? Because you weren't afraid. You fought back, and I thought... Caroline looked around the refuge. I thought you might help them too. Rosalind took the papers, scanning names and stories that echoed her own. Women courted and betrayed, abandoned when they became inconvenient, left with nothing. I'll help them, she said, all of them. Thank you. I know my family destroyed your life. They tried to. They failed. Rosalind stood. And now we'll make sure they can't destroy anyone else's. After Caroline left, Dorian found Rosalind in the library, surrounded by the papers Caroline had provided. More victims, she said without preamble. At least 7 women, maybe more. He read over her shoulder, his expression darkening. He was systematic about it. They all are. Men like him see women as disposable. She looked up at Dorian. I want to find them, help them, give them the same chance you gave me. The refuge isn't large enough for... Then we'll expand it. More buildings, more resources. I want every woman Caspian hurt to know she can find safety here. Dorian studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. You're going to bankrupt me. You can afford it. I can. He pulled her to her feet. And I will, because this matters to you, and you matter to me. Just to you. To everyone. You've become rather famous, you know. The Duchess who survived and fought back. Women write to you daily. Men watch their behavior around you because they know you won't tolerate cruelty. Good. Let them be frightened. My fierce Duchess. He kissed her forehead. What would I do without you? Probably run a very efficient, very cold household. Probably. Thank God you ruined that plan. That evening they hosted a small dinner. Nothing formal, just close friends. Lord and Lady Ashford, Lady Grantham, Lord Thornton, Sir Edmund Price, and Rosalind's sister Charlotte, who'd blossomed under Ravenfield's protection. To the Duchess, Lord Ashford toasted, who proved that courage and justice still matter. To justice, Rosalind corrected, raising her glass, and to second chances. After dinner, she and Dorian walked through Ravenfield's gardens. Snow was beginning to fall again, soft flakes that reminded Rosalind of that night in the forest. Do you ever think about it? She asked. That night you found me. Every day, I think about what would have happened if I'd chosen a different road, if I'd left 5 minutes later, if I'd assumed you were already dead and didn't check. But you did check. I did, and my entire life changed. He stopped walking, turning to face her. I was half alive before you, going through motions, playing games, never feeling anything real. And now I feel everything. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I wouldn't change a single moment. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Which is why I wanted to give you this. Rosalind opened the box to find a ring, delicate silver with a single sapphire that caught the moonlight. It was my mother's, Dorian said. She gave it to my father when they were engaged. Told him it represented her promise to see him clearly, both the strength and the scars. I want you to have it for the same reason. Dorian, I already have a wedding ring. That was a contract. This is a choice. I'm choosing you, Rosalind, every day for the rest of my life. She let him slide the ring onto her right hand, beside the wedding band on her left. I choose you too, she whispered. Even though you're stubborn and strategic and terrible at expressing emotion. I'm working on that last part. I know. It's very entertaining to watch. They kissed there in the falling snow, in the gardens of Ravenfield Manor, surrounded by the life they'd built from ashes and strategy and unexpected love. When they finally pulled apart, Rosalind rested her head against Dorian's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Tell me something, she said. Anything. Do you believe in fate now? He was quiet for a moment. I believe in you. I believe in us. I believe that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. He tilted her chin up. You were left in the cold to die. But I found you, and that choice, to stop, to check, to save you, that changed everything. For both of us, he agreed. They stood there as snow gathered on their shoulders, two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and built something neither had planned but both had needed. Rosalind had been abandoned once, thrown away like she meant nothing. But Dorian had found her, had chosen her, had loved her when she'd stopped believing love existed, and together they'd proven that the coldest nights could lead to the warmest futures, if you were brave enough to survive them. 6 months after that night in the gardens, Ravenfield Women's Refuge had expanded to accommodate 50 women. The Holtworth financial empire had collapsed completely, with Lord Holtworth and his wife arrested in France and extradited to face trial. Caspian remained in debtor's prison, his charm finally insufficient to save him. Rosalind and Dorian became known throughout England as the couple who fought corruption and won. But more importantly, they became known to each other as partners who'd chosen love over strategy, courage over fear, and second chances over bitter endings. She'd been left in the cold once, but he found her anyway, and that choice saved them both. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story touched something in you, the fight for justice, the power of being chosen, the strength it takes to survive, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you are listening from. If you're ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even in the coldest moments, love can find a way.